I'm Jennifer Priest, and today I'm going to show you this really crazy setup that I have in Tailwind for pinning to group boards without doing repeats on the boards that have limits, and by doing lots of repeats on the boards that don't have limits. And this is for group boards. So if you've ever pinned on Tailwind and just gone a little nuts with the pinning to group boards, you might have gotten kicked off of group boards. And this last month or so, I got kicked off of, I think, 4 group boards. And I was like, okay, I've got to change how I'm doing this. So I'm going to show you guys this system that we're using so that we can stack our pins, essentially looping them on Tailwind by using board lists, and also using board lists to make sure that we are not overpinning to group boards. So let's get started. Now in Tailwind, there is this area called board lists. So you have publish, and then underneath that is a drop down, and there's an area where you can create lists of boards. And what I did here is I took a few different boards that had different characteristics. So I found all the group boards I was on that had no limitations as far as how many times I could pin to them. And there were 8. So I took those 8 boards and I made 8 lists out of them, and I just varied the order. So you can notice, like, from list 8 to list 7, it's kind of, this one board is bumping from the bottom to the top. And then from list 7 to list 6, that the next board bumps from the bottom to the top, etc. So I started with the first board. It's somewhere down here. Oh, it's right here. Once I had the first one done, it was pretty easy just to copy it and make the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. Just changing the order of those boards and saving them in this way. So this is a way to kind of loop your pins without having that looping function, which Tailwind does not yet have. I also took the boards that had a limit on how many pins I could do on them, and I just put them all in their own lists. Now, because I'm only in a few group boards that have limits, I didn't bother separating them out by topic. I just separated them out by the limit. So I have like crafts, mason jars, graphic design, food, Pinterest, home decor, blah, blah, blah. It's a whole mix. So when I add these to my pin in Tailwind, I just X out of the ones that aren't applicable to that particular pin. But this really helps me to make sure that no matter what the topic is, that I'm never overreaching with or overpinning to those group boards that have a limit. So as a rule, when I'm pinning in Tailwind, I don't pin to any group boards unless I'm pinning to them from a list. That way I know what the limitations are. Okay, so we're going to go over here to my brand bank. This is my secret tool. And this is really going to help me with my boards that have limits and with pinning to my boards that don't have limits. So the first round when I'm pinning, and if you guys want access to this, you're going to have to message me. The first round when I'm pinning, well, the very first thing you got to do is look at the number of pins you have. Typically, we have 2 to 3 pins per post. Sometimes we have 4. It's pretty rare. So I created this calculator so that all you have to do is type in that you have 3 pins on that post, and it's going to calculate everything for you. The days that you're going to pin each board, the interval, the hour interval, so that your pins aren't all in a group, so that you're not pinning all of pin 1 6 days in a row and then all of pin 2 6 days in a row. This interval is going to help it be mixed up in your feed, so it doesn't just have like these blocks of the same pin over and over and over again. And so I thought a long time about this. It took me a few hours. There's lots of formulas in here in Google Drive to get this to work. So if you wanted to try to replicate this for yourself, I'm going to tell you right now, it is not easy. There are a lot of if formulas in here and some logic stuff going on. But this is how it works. And so once you have this set up, you can have a VA or somebody do this for you really, really easily. The first time that you pin that pin, you're going to pin it to every single relevant board except for group boards. And you're going to put the interval at 69 hours. This is if you have 3 pins. So I'm going to go to a post that I have 2 pins on. So that one I'm going to pin it every 46 hours. And the start day is in relation to the day that the blog post published. So this post is publishing on the 28th. So I'm going to hit my Tailwind button. I'm going to find the pin image, which is this long image. I'm going to grab both of those. And you can do these at the same time or do them separately. So this is for round 1. I'm going to start the first pin on day 1 and the second pin on day 2. Again, you can do them at the same time or you can do these separately. Whoops, wrong thing. You can do these separately if that's going to work easier for you and help you kind of keep track better. So I'm going to skip for this. I'm going to skip my board lists that have group boards. Like this is Smart Fun DIY. This is my list for like my blog. And then I have another list for craft things. And these craft things are also no limit boards. But because I'm going to be using my no limit board list, I'm not going to worry about these craft ones right now. Because I don't want to just, even though there's no limit, I don't want to bombard those boards with like, hey, here's 84 of my same pin all together. Like, I don't want to do that. So, okay, this is all group boards too. So I'm going to delete that one too. I'm still fixing my board list. So I have some old lists in here, but popular recipes, that's one of mine. So like I said, it's a little easier if you just skip all your board lists and then go down to just your regular boards and scroll through and just pick the things that are not group boards and that are not private that are applicable. And like if you know the names of your boards, you can also put those in here. So I know that like party is one, and this is also all party food. So I'm gonna do party eats. It's for a movie. It's something that a girl would like. So I'm gonna put daughter. It's a pop culture thing. So everything that I can think of that's relevant, I'm going to find boards for that. So it's paper craft. It's sweets and desserts. So I'm going to try to put everything on there. This TV, movies, and music is my board. That's a group board. So normally I would say do not put group boards in the mix when you're doing this first level, right? Round 1, we're not going to do group boards. We're just going to put on everything that's relevant. However, I own the group board. There's no rules. I'm going to pin to it. So I got all my pins in there. And what I'm going to do is this first one, according to this, the start date is day 1 for pin 1. So I'm going to start that on day 1. So I'm going to click use interval. I'm going to go to day 1, which is going to be the 28th. That's the day that it's going to publish. I don't want it to start at 10 o'clock at night. There's not enough room in the day to do all that stuff. So I'm going to start at like 3 in the morning, maybe 4 or 5, just to make sure that we're not having a time zone issue because I'm on the West Coast Pacific time and I don't know if this is set to my correct time or not. So I'm going to put it at 5 a.m. So I'm sure that my blog post will be published. I'm going to go to open time slots and I'm going to see what it gives me. And I want to dial this down to about every, normally I would do every 23 hours if it was one post, but because I'm doing 2 pins, so I'd do every 23 hours if it was 1 pin. But since I'm doing 2 pins, it says to do it every 46 hours. So I'm going to go back over here. You can kind of drag this little toggle thing, but if you type in 46 hours, it will do the calculation for you. So that's so that it's going to pin on the 28th and then the 1st and then the 3rd. So you can see it's pinning every other day. So when I start the next pin, it's going to pin on the days between these days. So it would pin on the 30th, the 2nd, the 4th, etc. So that way I'm getting a mix with my pins. I'm still staggering them. I'm still making sure I'm pinning them really often, but I'm not pinning them in these like blobs of the same one pin at a time. I'm going to go ahead and click set interval once I've checked that. Then I will go to use interval for the next one, and I'm going to set it to start the next day. So day 1, when the blog post publishes, is the 28th. I'm going to put this for the 29th. Again, I'm going to change it to a reasonable time of day, not 10 p.m. because there's just not a lot of room there. And it's already set to the same interval I had the previous one set at, which is that 46 hours. So I'm just going to do a quick check here. So it's going to start it on the 29th, the 1st, the 3rd. So those aren't the days that I wanted. So let me just double check. This guy's starting on the 28th. This one's starting on the 29th. So let's go a little bit fewer hours. And part of the problem here is that I'm using open time slots. So if this is not working with your open time slots, like let's say that your Tailwind schedule is really, really full. Like I already have 685 pins scheduled, and those are all scheduled during the same time. So there's not going to be a lot of gaps in here. See how there's not a lot of gaps in my schedule. So if that's the case, if you've already really scheduled out a lot and you don't have gaps, you can click optimized or exact to try to help make this work a little bit better. So I'm going to put this back to my 46 hours that I had. And now it's starting the 29th to 1st. Okay, let's try exact. 29, 1, 2, 4, 6. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a weird thing going here, and it might just be because of the time of day I'm starting it at. No, let's try this again. It doesn't have to be super exact, but I do want to make sure the first one was on my odd days. I want to make sure this one's hitting my even days. So for most of the posts, it's hitting the proper day that it needs to be on. Just this Sunday one is not the right day. So no biggie. So we'll go ahead and set the interval for that one. So now they're both pinning opposite each other for the most part. And I also try to make sure when I'm doing my pins, even though the topic is the same and the colors are the same, that I have some kind of different focus on these two pins. So this focus is on the candy apples, and this focus is on the party ideas and the movie. So that will help too with making your feed look a little bit more interesting than if you just had the same thing over and over. So once I have those intervals set, I will schedule all. So this will be the end of round 1 according to my sheet here. So round 1's done. Now we're going to go to round 2. And on round 2, the first pin and the second pin, we're going to do our no limit lists. But the first one we're going to start on day 1, and the second one we're going to start on day 2. So it's pretty much just like what we just did, except our interval is going to fit within the calendar day. And when we go to the next list, we're going to be pinning on different days. Because we don't have a pin 3 or pin 4, we're not going to be using these columns. But if we did have 4, I would just change the number of pins up here and it would calculate everything out for me. The intervals, the days I pin it on, etc. I'm just going to change it back to 2. And so I'm going to do no limit list 1 starts on day 1. No limit list 1 starts on day 2 for pin 2. I'll go back over here, close out this little extra Tailwind guy, and click the Tailwind button again. Now, you don't have to do all this from Tailwind, but because this, or from your blog post, you can do this with the original pin that you put on Pinterest. But because this post hasn't actually published yet, I don't want to put a pin on Pinterest because it hasn't published yet. So, oh, why is it doing that? I don't want to do that. So let me make sure I'm grabbing both of the images. So I'm just doing this with the pins and not with, or I'm just doing this with the images from my blog and not with the actual pin image from Pinterest. But you could totally do it with the pin image from Pinterest. So now what I'm going to do, and this is where the no limit list is really nice. I'm going to type in no limit, pick the first list. It's in the order that I put the first list in. And I'm just going to start this one on the first day, which is the 28th. I'm going to set the interval so that this last pin is also occurring within that first day. So again, I have to change the time. If it's 10:30 p.m., there's not a lot of room in there to put 8 pins on the one day. Another note about this, you do not want to do this strategy until you are pinning about 30 to 50 times a day. If you're only pinning 8 times a day or 10 times a day, this is going to fill up your whole queue. And again, you're going to run into that problem of it's going to look like you just have the one thing you're pinning over and over and over again. So you need a mix of stuff. I also only do this strategy with my brand new pins. I'm not doing it with anything else. But this strategy where I'm running through this list is only with the brand new stuff, not with the old stuff or seasonal or anything like that. Okay, so let's go back to this list. So I'm going to drag and adjust this until I can get it all down into the 28th. And because I have my schedule already full, I'm not going to be able to put it into my open time slots. So I'm just going to adjust this around until I can get it within the 29th. So, or the 28th. Drag it just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm pinning from 2 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's super good. So I'm going to set interval. The next one I'm going to start on the second day, which is the 29th. And again, I need to move the time so that I have space during the day to schedule this out. And since I already set the first one at 2.5 hours, this one's set at 2.5 hours. But if I leave it on open time slots, everything's not going to fall within that Friday, the 29th. So I'll try optimized and see if that works. And so everything falls within that Friday, and that works. If that doesn't work, then I would go to exact. Set interval, schedule now. So now I'm ready to go to the second list. So no limit list 2, I'm going to pin 1 on day 3, and I'm going to pin 2 on day 4. So I will go back over here. And this helps if you have 2 monitors, which I do. However, when we're recording the screen, you can't tell if I'm switching back and forth between 2 monitors. So I'm going to go back and click these again. And again, you want to make sure you're only doing this crazy stuff with a no limit board. Okay, so this would go on my number 2 no limit board. And again, I would do my interval. This would start on day 3, which would be the first. Change my time. I'm going to check to make sure everything's hitting on the first. It's not. So I'm going to try optimized. Everything is hitting on the first and across the whole day. So I'm going to go ahead and set interval. This one's going to be on day 4. So I'll do that on the 2nd. Make that start around 12 a.m. And again, check my dates. Here I've got some going in the 3rd, so I don't want that. So I'll try optimized. That looks pretty good. Set interval and schedule all. This literally should take you like 10 minutes, and you're going to schedule hundreds and hundreds of pins. So when I showed you my Tailwind account, I had 600 pins done. We're not even halfway done. I'm going to hit refresh on here so that you can see how many pins we've just added. And this is really great if you're doing this with your new content, because it's going to help give it a boost. So we just added about 100 or maybe 80 pins with all that new stuff. And you can see they're mixed in here with my other stuff. I just happen to have done a lot of pink things lately. There's a lot of pink in there. But it is mixed up. Okay, so let's pretend that we've gone through this whole system already. Now we're coming down to the limit, the board lists that have a limit. And again, if you change the number up here, these are going to change. So if I change this to 4, then it's going to tell me the day that I need to pin things to that board list. It's going to tell me what day that should be. So I have 2 pins for this. So the limit 1 board list, I'm going to pin one thing on day 1 and then pin 2 on day 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Click my Tailwind, little bookmarklet thing here in Chrome, which is super handy for pinning. I totally love it. And then I'm going to go to my limit 1 per day list, which only has 2 things on it. These aren't really home decor, but they are trending. So I'm just going to delete out the home decor one, and I'm just going to pin it to trending. And I'm going to pin, because it's limit 1, on the first day, which is the 28th. I'm going to just, you can pick a custom time, or you can try to put it in your queue, but I just pick a custom time. So I'll put it 10 in the morning on the 28th, set a custom time. And then this one would be on day 2, which is the 29th. And I'll do that at like a different time of day. So maybe 3 p.m. Set custom time. So I got 10 a.m., 3 p.m. And I'm going to schedule both. And I made sure I use different pins too, because those group boards, they don't like it when you're pinning the same thing. Like, yeah, their limit is 1 per day, but they don't want you pinning the same thing every day. So that's when it's also good to do multiple pins for your posts. So you have these different kind of looks going on, and it looks like a fresh new pin. It doesn't look like the same old pin that you already were doing. So going back here to my list, on my limit 2, once you get to limit 2, 3, 5, it gets a lot easier if you're doing less than 4 pins, because it's like goes really fast. So my limit 2 stuff, those are all going to be on day 1. My limit 3 is all going to be on day 1 because I only have 2 pins, and limit 5 is all going to be on day 1 because I only have 2 out of the 5 pins. Could you go in and make sure that you are pinning your 5 things a day to these group boards for the limit 5 pin boards? Sure. That's too much work. I just am worried about my new stuff. So that's the only thing that I run through here. And because I don't publish a blog post every day, I have room in my schedule for this. So I publish on Mondays and Thursdays. So then I know that like even if I had 3 or 4 pins on this, if I published on Thursday and then I came back around on Monday and started pinning my new things with my limit to these limit boards, I would still be okay because I wouldn't still be pinning the stuff from the last time I published to that same board. If you publish every day, you're going to need to have some different intervals and some safeties kind of built in here so that you don't overpin to those boards that have limits. All right, so I've got these ones chosen. So when I'm doing limit 2, those are just going to all be on that one same first day. So again, I would go through here and say, okay, this one's anything goes, blogger, recipes. I've got recipes, and this is crafts and DIY, this whole post. It's a party. So I can do those both on that same first day also. So I'm going to go back to the 28th, which is the day that it publishes. And this is that first one where I was showing you where it was the trending, and we were only doing it to one board. It's kind of like boring because you're not putting the interval, but I'm going to show you now how to do your interval. Okay, so we want to put the start time sometime early in the morning, and we're going to change the interval so that everything's pinning within that one day. So again, because our open time slots are full, we want to make sure that we choose optimized. If optimized doesn't work, then we would choose exact. So I'm going to push this time up a little bit. Whoops. To try to get this throughout the day. So I'm starting at 4 a.m. and ending at 10 p.m. I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to change my interval settings again to optimized and to try to get this to go throughout the day, but not at the same times I had it going, this one going. So I don't want to pin like bam, bam, right in a row, right? Because I want there to be a little bit of space so that other people's pins will come in between my 2 pins that day. So I'm going to set interval, and then I'll schedule both of those. And then you would just keep going down the list to the limit 3 boards, to the limit 5 boards. So I hope this was helpful for you in ways to try to avoid getting kicked off your group boards in Pinterest, and then how to loop on your group boards in Tailwind when you have the no limit, the boards that don't have any limit on the number of pins that you can do. How can you loop them but still be respectful to that board and not just like inundate it with your stuff like all the time? All right, so if you have any questions, please put them down in the comment section. And if you want to learn more about Pinterest and Tailwind strategy, definitely hit me up over on my Facebook page at Smart Creative Social, or here on YouTube. You can leave a comment and I will get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.